to join you for this first meeting of the task force. I first want to thank Senator Dylan Roberts and Cleve Simpson and Representative Karen McCormick and Matthew Martinez for their leadership on this bill. This is really an important topic, and we really couldn't do it without you. Also, want to thank you all for your willingness to serve on this really important task force. I know you all have very busy jobs, and the fact that you're taking time to do this is really important. And so I just really appreciate you all. Finally, I'm grateful for Karen Schlatter with the Colorado Water Center at CSU for stepping up to also help us with these efforts. So thanks so much, Karen. You know, we work really hard at the Department of Natural Resources to build sustainable, livable future, and securing our water future is a really critical piece of the puzzle. In the face of climate change and extraordinary growth and enormous pressures from downstream states, this bill and the task force is allowing us to work together in a nonpartisan way to ensure sufficient water supply for Coloradans and Colorado's economy, as well as funding for energy impact to local governments. So today, the severance tax revenue from all extractive industries, but primarily oil and gas, provides support for water funding and the state and for local governments. And it's really been a tremendous source of revenue for about 50 years now. As we look to ensure sustainable and strong support for water projects, you all are here to identify additional revenue sources to supplement severance tax revenue. The diverse group of stakeholders that are here and all the expertise that you have will really help look at the untapped, potential of revenue around the state, and really help with this process. So I know you all will think critically and creatively while you work on this task force. I want to make sure you're all aware of the folks that we have representing the state of Colorado on this. We have Carly Jacobs, we have Lauren Riss, we have Robert Sakata, and Eric Bergman. I've worked with all of them so closely, and they'll be a great resource for you all. And then also, I'm really excited to have Nate Pearson, my assistant director on water, to serve as a project manager, and his expertise and wealth of knowledge I know will be really beneficial for this process as well. So me and my team are really invested in this effort. We're here to support and to guide the work in any way that we can. And I'm just, again, so grateful for your willingness to step up to be a part of this process. So with that, let me turn it over to my neighbor and my friend, Senator Dylan Roberts, to provide some opening remarks. So Senator Roberts.
Thanks. Thank you, Director Gibbs, and good morning, everybody. Really appreciate the time to share just a few minutes with you as you get your work kicked off here. Mostly just want to extend, as Director Gibbs did, my thanks and gratitude for your service on this task force. It is going to be a lot of work in a pretty abbreviated and condensed timeline. And so thank you for stepping up to do that work and representing your part of the state and your background and your interests in this space. Senator Simpson and I came up with this idea, just for your background and awareness, came up with this idea over the last couple of years down at the legislature, where we have seen the Joint Budget Committee have to dip into severance tax funds in order to balance our state budget. And those are all dollars, we have to pass a balanced state budget. We understood the decision making, but those were all dollars that would normally go to water projects or to local grants that were impactful for communities and counties and parts of our state. And unfortunately, with our state budget issues and the increased demand of other parts of our state government, we can't count on severance tax revenues to be the primary driver of water project funding. And so that's the goal of this task force. Is we want you all to work together, to get creative, to be bold, to throw out as many ideas as possible, to think through the pros and cons, to think about a future where severance tax is no longer the primary source of water project funding in our state. We hope that it can stay that way. We are not looking to change that at the moment, but I think the trends in the natural evolution of our state and our state budget is pointing us in that direction, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. And so we know that water and securing our water future will always be a priority for our state. And so we need to find ways to make sure that the state can fund what we need to do to secure that future. So we intentionally did not include legislators in this group. We do want this group to be free of any sort of political pressure. We want you to think about this from the nitty gritty, to get creative, to be bold, like I said. And we really look forward to your recommendations as they come forward in January and July of next year. So thank you again for your service. We would love to be a resource, a sounding board, if that becomes helpful. But Godspeed, good luck, and we really look forward to seeing what you all come up with.
Thank you, Senator Roberts, and thank you, Director Gibbs. Really appreciate the remarks and really helpful to set the tone for the work of this group over the coming months. I'm going to drop in the chat here for everyone on the panel and all the attendees. First, the agenda, and then also the website that has been developed for this process. On that website is posted the agenda, also the Zoom link, and all future meeting information will be posted to that website and publicly noticed. We will also be posting recordings of these meetings to that website so that folks who miss them can listen back, so that we as a group can refer to past conversations and reference discussions that we've had. And as the work group develops documents or is considering past work, we'll be posting resources to that webpage as well. So just want to make sure folks have those links. And again, based on the agenda that we have here, we want to take some time and have everybody in this group on the task force and the participants. So myself and Karen, as not task force members, but as integral parts of the group, will also introduce ourselves. And I would love if task force members could introduce yourself, what your role is, but also what experiences you're bringing to this role and the perspectives that you'll be able to help bring to the group. Would be really great to hear from everybody. So I will start that process and then I'll pass it to Karen, and then I think we could go through all the task force members with some brief introductions and just background. So my name is Nate Pearson. I'm the Department of Natural Resources Assistant Director for Water Policy. So in that role, I coordinate all of the department's work on water issues across our divisions, working with the governor's office, our divisions, with the legislature, with our federal partners, on, again, all water policy issues. And there aren't many water policy issues that are a bigger deal than the funding that we bring to bear on water projects, water conservation, all the amazing work that our divisions do. And so it's been a huge focus of mine. Water funding, that has been a huge focus of mine over my career. I started my career in public service in the Colorado Governor's Office, working as a policy and budget analyst. I was there for 7 years. Severance tax and water funding was part of my portfolio in that time. The entire time I was there. I moved to the Department of Natural Resources about 4 years ago as recovery officer, so managing the DNR's federal funding portfolio, especially in the wake of COVID-19 and the large influxes of federal funding for water projects and a wide variety of other natural resource programs. And for the last year and a half, I've been serving as assistant director for water policy. And so my entire career in public service in Colorado has been focused on water funding in some capacity. I've been involved in basically all of the legislative and or otherwise task forces, policy working groups on severance tax over the past decade, and hope to bring a lot of that experience and perspective to helping work with and guide the work of this group. So I'm really thankful for the opportunity to get to ask big questions and hopefully come up with big answers in this critical funding space. And yeah, just really appreciate you all being here and looking forward to working with you all. And so I'll pass it to Karen next. And Karen, it would be great if you could introduce yourself, and then I know there are some others from CSU who are attendees, and if you could give an overview of the team that you've pulled together as well, that would be amazing.
Sure. Thank you, Nate. Yeah, thank you. I just want to say I'm honored at the opportunity to work on this project in partnership with DNR and their leadership on this work, and working with you all on the task force to develop these longer term strategies for future funding for water and local government. So my name is Karen Schlatter. I'm the director of the Colorado Water Center at Colorado State University. I've been director since April of this year, and prior to that was interim director for about 9 months, and prior to that was associate director since starting in 2023. I've worked on a variety of water issues, both quantity, quality. In the West, I used to work on Colorado River issues. I had a short stint working in Florida at the University of Florida Water Institute prior to coming back to Colorado. But really, my career is focused on working kind of at the intersection of stakeholder needs and bringing those needs to the forefront for water-related research and education. And so at the Colorado Water Center, that's our work is essentially all about that, which is a great fit for me. So really working with water users, water agencies, all of our various water stakeholders in the state of Colorado, and serving those stakeholders to address research needs, to address educational needs for the state. And so I'm excited. I've got a great team of folks that I'm bringing from Colorado State University to partner with the Colorado Water Center on this work. And I'll just mention them briefly. I don't know if we'll have time for them to do introductions. So the Colorado Water Center is leading the third-party work for this study. And that is going to include, the stakeholder engagement piece with the task force, also a lot of the research components, and then the report writing. And so we're partnering with a great team of largely economists to do kind of the research side of the work. So we've got Rebecca Hill, who's an extension professor, an agricultural economist. She's with she also partners with the Regional Economic Development Institute at CSU. She is going to be the lead research project investigator for this study. And she is coordinating with other economists from CSU to do this work, including Chris Gomans, who's a professor in the Department of Agricultural Resource Economics, and then Tim Komarak, who is an applied economist that focuses on urban, rural, and regional economics. He's got joint appointments in the Department of Economics in the Office of Engagement and Extension. We've also got a wonderful graduate student working on this project, which we are excited to also kind of bring in that workforce development aspect to the work. And we are anticipating having another employee from the Colorado Water Center who may be assisting depending on our interview needs with the task force. So that is our wonderful team that we have bringing. I look forward to working with you all again and really, diving down into this work. I know we're kind of on a short timeline, so looking forward to getting this kicked off.
Thanks so much, Karen, and I appreciate you giving a rundown of the team you've pulled together. Really excited to work with them all. I think we'll plan at future meetings to have some, direct engagement between that team and the task force in these public meetings. And otherwise, we will talk later in this meeting about sort of, expectations of the task force for engagement with that team going forward. So, but with that, would love to continue with introductions, and I'll just maybe go based on who I see on the screen, and not to surprise folks, but I'll start with Robert Cicada, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Thanks,
And then
Nate.
after that, Carly Jacobs, please.
Thanks, Nate. Thanks very much. And thanks, Senator Roberts, for this opportunity to do this. I think it's really intelligent that we look to the future for water funding. I don't know, Laura, you could probably update us more, but I thought at one time the water plan said we have 20 billion potentially to support water. And am I frozen? Everybody else is frozen.
Your screen is frozen, but we can still hear you.
Okay, I'm going to shut off my camera. Um, so thank you. I'm Robert Sakata. I'm serving as the delegate for the Commissioner of Agriculture, who is named as one of the uh, task force members, serving on behalf of Commissioner Greenberg, and happy to do so. My background, briefly, I'm a farmer. Our family has a farm in Brighton, Colorado, so I've been involved and really dependent on water all my life. So it's been a major part of my life. It's served 15 years on the Water Quality Control Commission. Had the pleasure and honor of serving 3 years on the CWCB as well as on the IBCC. So have been involved in water for a long time and look forward to our participation here. So thanks, Nate.
Thanks, Robert. Carly? And then after that, we'll go with Jim Yon, please.
Thanks, Nate. Hi, everyone. My name is Carly Jacobs. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Department of Natural Resources, and I am serving as the designee from DNR on behalf of Executive Director Gibbs. So I just wanted to thank Senator Roberts and the bill sponsors and Director Gibbs for the opportunity to serve on this task force in support of our charge to evaluate the future of severance tax and water funding needs and for local governments, which is a critically important issue for Colorado. And also my thanks to Nate and Karen for the work to support us and get us organized and started on this task. I've been working intensively on severance tax issues for just over 12 years now, which is hard to believe. I just counted on my fingers this morning, but I started as a nonpartisan staff analyst at the Joint Budget Committee, where I was assigned to cover severance tax as part of my larger natural resources portfolio. And then when I came over to the Department of Natural Resources, I, of course, am dealing directly with severance tax in my capacity as a budget director and now the CFO. And I think the quality of my sleep has been affected more than I would like to admit over the past decade by what the forecast looks like and what severance tax and the state budget looks like. So I'm certainly well acquainted with with how all that works. Same as Nate, I've supported a number of task forces and working groups on severance tax and funding issues over the years. So deep dives into the technical and structural issues around severance tax and water funding. And part of my responsibilities at DNR include the oversight of the Severance Tax Operational Fund, which supports approximately 160 permanent FTE and ongoing operations for oil and gas and water and wildfire and a lot of our other important functions. So I am acutely aware of the challenge, considerable challenge of funding all of these critical needs in light of, or perhaps in spite of, significant revenue volatility and severance tax, and also through the uncertainty of the statewide budget environment. And then just water projects and funding from severance tax and other sources are a significant part of DNR's financial portfolio. And over those same 12 years, I've had the pleasure of working with CWCB and DWR to address water funding issues and to navigate through the ups and downs of available revenue to help support water projects and grants to the greatest extent possible. So I'm just really pleased to be here and thankful for the opportunity and look forward to working with the other members of the task force and Nate and Karen and her team on this important issue.
Thanks, Carly. Jim? And then
All
Doug.
right. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Jim Yon. Currently, I'm the manager of the North Sterling and Pruitt reservoirs, so two Plains reservoirs up here in northeast Colorado that serve about 350 farmers and about 70,000 irrigated acres of land. I grew up on a ranch in northeast Colorado, so I'm a fourth generation rancher. My wife and I still ranch some up in this area. Kind of in my water background, I've been a member of the South Platte Basin Roundtable since the inception of the roundtables in 2005. I am currently a Interbasin Compact Committee representative on the roundtable, which I started in 2012. I'm a past chair of the roundtable. I represented the South Platte Basin on this Colorado Water Conservation Board for 5 years. I was appointed by Governor Hickenlooper in 2015. But for our group here, I am a county commissioner. I became a county commissioner in January of 2015, so I got tapped as a county commissioner. So I'm wearing my county commissioner hat instead of my water hat, even though they kind of go together. So that's where I come from.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jim. Doug?
Good morning. Thanks for allowing me to participate. My name is Doug Dennison. I'm representing the oil and gas industry. I've spent about the last 25 years working in oil and gas in a number of different aspects. Time is roughly split between the Western Slope and the DJ Basin. Initially started back in the early 2000s as Garfield County's first oil and gas liaison, and during my stint with the county, got very involved in how severance tax affects local governments. Have worked for a number of different oil and gas operators, so I have that perspective of the people who pay the severance tax dollars. But I'm also a third generation Colorado native, born and raised in Gunnison, and I'm old enough that I can just barely remember when Blue Mesa Dam was being built. I've worked in prior to oil and gas and ag and recreation and also oil and gas, all three industries where water is very important. But having lived most of my life in Colorado, realize how important water is to this state. And from an oil and gas perspective, I'm sure you're all aware that we use water in our development, but increasingly over the last few years, the focus on reuse and recycling of water has really increased, and I have a lot of experience in that arena, and I look forward to participating with you all. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Doug. Next, can we have Lauren introduce herself, and then Elise?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Lauren Riss, and I'm the Executive Director of the Colorado Water Conservation Board. I've been in that position for about 2 years now. And prior to that was the Deputy Director of the agency for about 7 years. Prior to that, I was the Assistant Director for Water in Nate Pearson's role at DNR. And before that, I was the Legislative Liaison for DNR. I've been with the state, I've been with DNR since 2013. And prior to my time at DNR, I worked on Legislative Council staff for the General Assembly, where I staffed the Agriculture Committee and wrote fiscal notes. I also staffed the Interim Water Committee. And so through all that experience, I've seen a variety of bills and legislative efforts and conversation and JBC processes around water funding and severance tax, and have seen the volatility of that, have experienced the various efforts at sometimes sweeping or redirecting severance tax from our cash funds to other budget needs around the state. Is also involved in the drafting of the first water plan in 2015, and then the update in 2023, and the creation of the water plan grant program. So have a broad experience in water and funding and how those issues interact.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lauren. Elise, and then Brian, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Elise Ackerman-Castleberry. I'm City Manager in Delta, and very happy to be participating on this committee representing local government. Prior to being with the City of Delta, I was Delta County. Actually, I was with Douglas County once upon a time too. Delta County as their Community Development Director, and prior to that, I was with DOLA as a Regional Manager, implementing the Energy Impact Grant Program. So I think part of my selection onto this committee is I've been on both sides of energy impact, both implementing the grant programs, as well as on the local government side, tapping into these resources and understand thoroughly the importance of this program to local communities, both on the DOLA side of the equation, but also on the water side of the equation. These are critical funds for local governments to implement for infrastructure, whether it's water, sewer, or water projects. So I think I've got a unique perspective being able to bring both the state and the local government picture to the table.
So thanks so much, Elise. Brian and then Sean, please.
Hey everybody, glad to be here. Brian Jackson, Environmental Defense Fund. Been heavily focused on water funding since 2015 water plan. Part of a number of conversations over the years. We led Proposition DD, which legalized sports betting and sent proceeds, tax proceeds to water and the water plan grant fund. Since then, we've raised 116 million bucks that way, and have done some tweaking and improvements therein. We ran another state ballot measure to de-Bruce it last year, Proposition JJ. It won with 76% of the vote, so this stuff's popular. We're on track now to have about 50 million bucks a year moving forward raised from that, of which CWCB is making great use of. So excited to be here, explore more options for more funding. I love this topic.
Thanks, Brian. Sean?
Yes, I'm Sean Bolton. I ended up with this appointment through Rose Puglisi as the House Minority Leader. I served as county commissioner in Rio Blanco County for 8 years, I think 2011 through 18. Did a lot of work on severance tax through those years. Also, I run a oil and gas service company, so I've been pretty much in the oil and gas business since about 2004. And on top of that, on the ag side of things, we run a ranch here in Meeker. I sit on multiple ditches that provide water to multiple areas that we farm and hay. Do a lot of work with Trout Unlimited right now on different projects, on water projects, and talking to them, and funding and stuff for a lot of their water projects. That's kind of why I'm here, just to try to bring a lot of stuff from the ag side in, and then also have some oil and gas background to kind of coexist with that. So that's what I'm here for.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sean. And then we'd love to have Wendy Padilla, DNR's Deputy Executive Director, introduce herself. She'll be giving us a presentation a little later on, but while we're doing intros, would be great to have you introduce yourself, Wendy.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. My name's Wendy Padilla. I'm the Deputy Executive Director for DNR. I've been with DNR for about 22 years. Started when I was 15 building trails in Spanish Peak State Wildlife Area. I grew up west of Trinidad. So my role today is just to kind of get all the governance structure and sort of housekeeping presentation out of the way so that you all know who your resources are, who to contact, how these meetings are structured, and then you can all get to the business of actually talking about the substance. And so I won't be on subsequent meetings, which I'm kind of sad about. Just after learning about all of your backgrounds, you all sound like an amazing group of folks. So nice to meet you all.
Awesome. Thanks so much. It's really amazing to hear all the perspectives and backgrounds people are bringing to this group. I'm more excited now than I was even half an hour ago to work with everybody. I also want to make sure that folks are aware that there are 2 task force members who weren't able to join us today. So Steve Wolf, who's the general manager of the Southwestern Water Conservation District, was appointed by the Senate president and will be serving. I understand that he's traveling internationally, but is looking forward to joining future meetings. And then Eric Bergman, who is the director of the Division of Local Government at the Department of Local Affairs, is serving on behalf of the DOLA executive director. And so that rounds out our task force and our introductions. As you all can see on the agenda, we've got some time to discuss the bill itself and develop a shared understanding of what we are setting out to do. And so you heard both from Director Gibbs and Senator Roberts about that, but I wanted to take a brief moment to walk through what I view as, the key pieces of the bill as it relates to our charge and the role of the task force. And so I'll walk through that briefly. Would love to answer any questions or discuss any of those points to the extent that it's useful, and certainly can circle back to that as we go through subsequent meetings. And so, as laid out in the bill, the Senate Bill 40 task force is here to evaluate one, options to continue to fund water needs and grants to local governments without relying on the revenues derived from severance taxes. Two, to avoid using severance tax to backfill the state budget in the future. And three, to begin to pay back the severance tax revenue previously used to backfill the state budget, and to make recommendations related to those three primary topics. The task force, as we've just heard from these introductions, is composed of members who bring experience in state government, local government, water management, oil and gas, agriculture, and environmental advocacy. I think those perspectives will all be really important as we set out to evaluate these things. As was discussed, as Karen introduced herself, the bill also directs the DNR to contract with a third party to conduct this study and write and research the report. DNR has contracted with the Colorado Water Center at CSU to be that third party. Again, Karen has already introduced herself and her team. And the purpose of the task force is to consult and coordinate with the third party in the development of that study. And so, as Senator Roberts discussed, the bill has two deadlines in it. There's a deadline for a draft report to be delivered from the third party to the task force and the DNR on January 15th, 2026. So a little more than 3 months from now. Again, that will be delivered from the third party, so the Water Center, to us as the task force and the DNR. The final deadline in the bill is that on July 15th, we will collectively deliver a report to the Water Resources and Agriculture Review Committee. That is the committee that originally brought this bill concept forward. And so you may have noticed that there's more time available for us to work after that initial January draft than before. I have been viewing that initial draft as, the baseline document from which we'll work and start to make policy recommendations. And so the Water Center is already underway doing background research, compiling resources on the topic, summarizing previous work done by the state on this topic, summarizing and researching how other states fund water and local government needs and handle their severance tax structures. So I think that draft report will cover a lot of that background information, and I think would love to discuss this. I think we can start working on policy recommendations, but I think a lot of the policy work and recommendations and will come in the spring of next year once we've collectively gotten our feet underneath us on the existing structure. And so that is, I think, the key overview of the bill that I want to make sure everybody has an understanding of. Happy to answer questions or talk through any of those. And some more of those details will be covered in Wendy's presentation as well at the top of the hour here. So any thoughts or questions as it relates to the bill and the charge of the task force? Great. Well, seeing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is just a brief discussion of the current funding structure. And so I'm going to give a pretty informal overview of the current severance tax structure and how money is collected and distributed to the DNR and the Department of Local Affairs. I think my primary goal in giving this brief overview is to one, make sure folks sort of understand just the basic baseline workings of severance tax, but two, I would love to get a sense from the task force members. And based on folks' experience, I don't think this will be a problem, but I want to understand folks' comfort level with the current structure and the recent work on this issue. if the task force desires, we can schedule time into our next briefing to do a deep dive on these subjects, if that would be helpful as we proceed. But would love folks, after I sort of give this overview, would love a brief discussion of both the current funding structure and the past work to make sure we all feel like we are embarking on this process with a shared understanding. So severance tax was first enacted in Colorado in 1977, and it's imposed on the production or extraction of a whole host of minerals, like molybdenum, oil shale, coal, oil and gas. Revenue, especially in recent years, has overwhelmingly come from the oil and gas sector. And so the market conditions in oil and gas and the tax rates and exemptions, credits, deductions on oil and gas primarily drive year-to-year severance tax collections. Once severance tax comes in the door to the Department of Revenue, which is the primary tax collection agency for the state of Colorado, it is split between the two departments we've been talking about. So 50% goes to the Department of Natural Resources and 50% goes to the Department of Local Affairs. Each of those agencies then subsequently split it again. And so on the DNR side, 50%, so 25% of the total, goes to the Perpetual Base Fund, which is managed by the CWCB for water loans and projects. The other 50% of DNR, so 25% of the total, goes to the Severance Tax Operational Fund, which funds, a wide variety of DNR programs, natural resources, energy-related programs, supporting, I believe, between 150 and 160 staff people at the DNR is the operational fund. And so a huge impact on the DNR, all the stakeholders we serve, and our divisions. The other half, so the half that goes to the Department of Local Affairs, is split 70-30. So 70% goes to discretionary grants to local governments impacted by oil and gas development. And then the other 30% goes to direct distributions to local governments based on factors measuring oil, gas, and mining activities. That is the broadest possible overview, I think, of the way severance tax is collected and distributed in Colorado. There is a whole lot of nuance in the tax collection, the tax policy, credits, deductions, exemptions. Happy to cover those at future meetings. I believe our report should cover all of those details, especially how they've changed over time. It's also worth mentioning that for water funding, and Brian mentioned this in his introduction, we have recently added a new revenue stream that supports the water plan grant program at the CWCB, and that is sports betting. So Proposition DD legalized sports betting in Colorado and directed the revenue derived from that to the CWCB. Proposition JJ last year removed the cap on that revenue, and a subsequent bill during the legislative session last year made some structural changes to that tax that we expect to further increase that revenue. And so certainly that revenue, additional revenue for water projects, is something that this group should factor into over time. And so I'll maybe stop talking about the current structure and see if folks have thoughts, questions, and in particular, whether this group would like to set aside time at our next meeting to do a deeper dive on the current structure.
Yeah, Nate, I was just wondering, do you have a history of the amount of money that's been collected over the last few years from severance tax? Just so I can get a feel. If there's
Yes,
something that you could send out sometime on that would be helpful to me.
yes, absolutely, Jim. Thank you for bringing that up. I can say I don't have a document ready to share right now, but that is absolutely something that we can share with the task force and make sure is published to the website. Severance tax revenue over the past 20 years or so has ranged between 0 and over 300 million. So the average is somewhere in the 140 million range, but it is quite volatile. I will say fiscal year 22-23, so 2 years ago, was, I believe, the highest collections ever in the history of severance tax at just under 350 million. 2 years before that, total collections were 1.9 million. And so though the average is 140, the variability is great between years, and most years are somewhere in more in the range of 140. That is a pretty extreme year-to-year change that we witnessed just a couple of years ago. But yes, that is something that we can share with the group and make sure is on the website as well.
Sounds like the flows in the South Platte River.
I think so. Any other thoughts or questions?
Nate,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
I having tracked sports betting and all the tweaks and fixes that we've had to do even over the last 5 years, I would be interested in just some of that history of what has been done, both on the collection side, anything to try to, stabilize it or put stuff away for a rainy day. And any further conversation there, just expanding our options in terms of looking at it. I don't want to take over, a full meeting or anything, but any more background and interim reading is great too.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Like I said, certainly willing to set some time aside at the next meeting to talk through those existing structures. And so, do other folks on the task force have thoughts about whether that would be worthwhile at our next meeting?
Nate, I think,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Doug.
I was just gonna say, I think it'd be helpful too, just to understand, how much of the severance tax fund has been redirected to the general fund over the last several years. So we understand the magnitude of that.
Thanks, Doug. I agree. That's a great factor to consider. Thank you. Other thoughts or questions? Great. Well, barring any thoughts to the contrary, I will plan to build into our next agenda a discussion of severance tax structure, recent policy changes, as well as sports betting recent changes, including in that a discussion of recent transfers to support general fund balancing, and we can do a deep dive. It'll be fun. Great. So with that, I will maybe just mention for the record and for the task force that there have been, in the last 5 years, 2 task forces that have focused on severance tax, and in particular to the structure and tax policy of severance tax. In 2021, Senate Bill 281 created a work group that was designed to evaluate and make recommendations on our severance tax system. In particular, credits, exemptions, deductions, the technical means by which we collect revenue. Those recommendations were submitted to the Joint Budget Committee. Those recommendations are something that we will make sure are shared with all of the task force members and posted to the website and as a resource. Subsequent to Senate Bill 281, House Bill 22, so a year later, 1391, both made certain tax policy changes that were recommended the previous year and created another work group to continue studying some of the trickier elements of the tax policy changes recommended by the previous group. That group just last year, or earlier this year, so January 2025, published a recommendation document that again further evaluates some of the trickier, more technical aspects of those tax policy changes. Again, that's a report we'll make sure is shared with the task force and posted on the website for folks to review. Again, I think it's really important for us to understand and operate from a shared understanding of all the work that's gone into this space over the past few years. I think it's also important to recognize the differences between the task force that we've assembled here and those previous task forces. Those groups were really aimed at evaluating the tax structure and evaluating ways to smooth revenue volatility within the existing tax structure. I view the charge of this current task force as different. It is, yes, to look at the impacts of severance tax to the general fund in the state, but the broader charge is to look at future funding options for water and local government funding. And so, as opposed to diving into the nitty gritty and making recommendations on how we might change severance tax, we may want to do that, or this group may want to do that. But I think the primary charge is to look forward at other options for funding. And so I think it's really critical for the group to understand the past work, but I also think important to understand how this group may differ. And so, like I said, those are resources that we will share and make sure on the website for folks who are interested and for further reading. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions or thoughts about some of that work that's happened over the past few years. But otherwise, we'll share those resources.
So I have a couple questions here for you. When you do this, give us the information on the severance tax. Is there a way to break that down per basically oil and gas, coal, different things like that? Because I know that what I'm hearing is Caldwell up here between Craig and Meeker, they're fixing to close. So I think there's gonna be some other hits to severance tax there. So therefore, I mean, if we start looking at the breakout of each place the severance tax comes from, if we know there's going to be an upcoming loss in revenue there, that would be nice when we start looking at the overall scheme of things here, instead of maybe skipping over something like that. I think that's a good thing to have in your back pocket when you start looking at this thing going forward and knowing where your losses are going to be coming, or future losses are going to be coming. I think that'd be a good thing to have.
Yeah, thanks so much for flagging that, Sean. I think that's a great point. I do know that the Department of Revenue, who collects severance tax, has, I believe, publicly available reports that break down revenue by industry. And so yes, the group and the public should be able to see those breakdowns, and I'll make sure that the group has that information broken down in the way you've just described. Because I think considering the sector and the different factors impacting each sector is a great point. And Sean, did you say you had other questions or thoughts?
And I was having technical difficulties. I don't get along with the computer very well. So, no, I think that was the one right off the top of my head here. I would just like to have that stuff broke out. Just when we start analyzing things, I think it'll help a little bit further down the road. So that's all I have right now.
Thank you. Other thoughts, questions, flags? Great. Well, as we've already discussed, we will make sure that the next meeting has time set aside for discussion of all of these factors and the resources that we'll make sure are provided in the interim between this meeting and the next. And for folks who are listening online, those resources are all that we've discussed are all already public, and we'll make sure are posted on the website as resources for the public to review as well. Great. Any final thoughts on past work? Otherwise, would love to talk just briefly about expectations for participation over the next 9 months. Great. So, later on in the meeting, I would like to discuss meeting schedule cadence for the group. I certainly have an idea of how I'd like to see that work, but I want to make sure that this group is able to, provide input and shape the cadence of the meetings sort of as it relates to your availability and capacity. I know this is an addition of work to all of your day jobs and one that we greatly appreciate you taking on, and just want to make sure that the meeting cadence works for you all, and that we're able to get the engagement that that the issue deserves. As we discussed already, the task force has the role of consulting and coordinating with the DNR and the task force on the creation of this report. I think as part of that, it will be critical that you all are able to engage with the water center and the research team there on an individual basis. And so I think in the short term, I think it would be very useful for each of you to set up an individual conversation with the water center to talk through, your perspectives on issues to research, resources to look into, ideas that you may have right off the bat that you think are ripe for discussion or research. So I would ask that over the next couple weeks and months that the task force members work with the water center to set up time for an interview along those lines. I think another thing that would be great for you to think about before you have that conversation is who else would be a good person for the water center to talk to in that process, who would bring a unique perspective or a particularly informed perspective to this process that you think would be valuable for the water center to talk to. So that's one ask of you all, is to schedule those meetings with the water center. And Karen, I don't know if you want to talk about how you'd like to schedule those, or if we can follow up, or if you'd like to follow up via email, but happy to leave space here for discussion of that element of the process.
Yeah, I'll just say we can follow up individually with folks to schedule those. Not a problem.
Great. Thank you so much. I'll also say that as we get going here and are really starting to get into policy ideas, there may be instances where the group decides that there needs to be follow-up between one meeting and the next. And in those cases, there may be asks for the group to do homework between meetings, or to do some deep thinking about issues, and come to the next meeting prepared to offer an opinion from your perspective and from those you're representing on that issue or policy idea. So please be prepared to engage between meetings, and to spend time thinking about these issues between meetings. Any questions or thoughts on those sorts of expectations? Like I said, we'll circle back to meeting cadence and scheduling a little bit later in our meeting, but I just wanted to lay out sort of those thoughts and expectations around engagement with our third party and with the DNR as we move forward. And maybe just one other thought on expectations. I think this meeting is, we are coming to you as the DNR, having spent a lot of time thinking about this over the past few months and planning for this process. And so I know I'm doing a lot of talking right now. I appreciate your understanding, and I hope it's helpful to sort of lay out the structure and process and background. But I do certainly hope and expect that the future meetings are that you as task force members are really driving the discussion, and that there's a lot of back and forth, and again, creative and collaborative thinking as we're moving forward. So I view this meeting as maybe an aberration from the rest. Yeah, Robert, I see you got your hand raised.
Yeah, Nate, I think you mentioned about ideas about who else to reach out to. So we passed those along to Karen too. I mean, for example, I was thinking maybe it'd be good to interact with the Interbasin Compact Committee about this.
Yeah, Robert, I think you can provide that directly to Karen. If you want
Okay.
to raise ideas right here on the line, I think that's great too. So, however you prefer.
Perfect. Thanks.
Great. Well, we are surprisingly on time right now as far as our agenda. So right as we're coming to the top of the hour, I would like to pass it to Wendy Padilla, DNR's executive or deputy executive director, to cover guidelines for boards and commissions, governance, and best practices for operating in this space. So thank you, Wendy, for being willing to give this presentation, and I'll kick it to you.
Yeah,
I will
and you're
share
gonna
this.
present? Okay, thanks, Nate. I put in the chat the link to the slides too. There's a lot of information there if you ever need to refer back, and I know Nate will be emailing these out. So as I said, I won't be a regular participant. My purpose today is just to kind of take care of all the housekeeping and give you all resources as if you run into issues, and then give you these slides so that you have those resources at your fingertips if you need to reach out. So next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the charter, accessibility for the meetings, and public comment, media contacts, and then legislative matters. Next slide. And I linked here the website so that you can have it as an easy reference to find. And as Nate said, the resources will be linked on the website. All of your names are there now and who you represent. Here's the purpose that Nate talked about originally, which is that the bill created the task force to evaluate these three goals: continue to fund water needs and grants to local governments without relying on the revenues derived from severance taxes, avoiding using severance tax revenue to backfill the state budget, and to begin to pay back the severance tax revenue previously used to backfill the state budget. And then also it includes the date. So the draft report's due January 15th. The final is due July 15th, 2026, at which point the task force work will conclude. The charter is here for you, and it just kind of goes through the rules of the road with CSU Colorado Water Center as the third party and the third party's purpose. Next slide. And then operating principles and responsibilities, including just, member conduct, willingness, engagement, demonstrating focus and charge of the group, and then, showing respect within the group. On the next slide, we have membership and participation, and you all are here because you've been appointed by various nominating officials, and you're here to bring your individual expertise, agencies, departments, or fields of practice expertise. We ask that you not send a delegate to represent you. Meetings will typically occur virtually. If you can't make a meeting, please let Nate know fairly well in advance. And if for whatever reason you can no longer participate, please let Nate know as soon as possible so we can work to fill that position. Nate will act as the chair and the project manager for the task force, but is not an official member of the task force. DNR's official member is Carly Jacobs, CFO, as you learned. And then public comment will be offered at every task force meeting. That was a requirement of the bill. And you'll see on our agenda today, public comment is offered at the end. Generally, will be limited to 3 minutes and must pertain to items on the agenda. And definitely Nate can work through that if there are other situations that come up where you all may want to allow more time.
Wendy, before I go to the next slide, I just wanted to note, as it relates to public comment, there's also a public comment form linked on the task force website. So anybody from the public who wants to comment in longer form or in more detail or in written form can do that at any time via the website. or come to a scheduled meeting and offer public comment. There's also on the website a link to a distribution list so that folks who want to be notified of future meetings and happenings of the task force can make that known to us. And I will go to the next slide now, Wendy.
Great, thank you. Okay, majority consensus. The task force shall seek majority consensus when possible, and we're defining that as general agreement by more than half of the task force members. And what that includes is either enthusiastically supporting a recommendation, option, or idea, supporting it, or maybe disagreeing with it, but you can abide by it or live with it. And then we will capture dissenting views and alternate recommendations that don't reach that majority consensus in documentation in the report. The task force will provide a summary of report of feedback on draft report language or alternatives, including technical rationale, relevant considerations, and any concerns or uncertainty regarding the technical merit of the draft language or alternatives. And Karen, I know that it will be you and your team's role, so thank you. Communication. You're free to discuss the work with any interested party, but in doing so, just clarify you're speaking for yourself, not the entire task force. Because this operates under open meetings law, which I'll go into in a little bit later, don't discuss task force actual business outside of the publicly noticed meeting. Use discretion when discussing kind of the group or any outcomes that you might envision. And, you know, I guess if anyone has any questions on that, contact Nate. Nate is definitely a good resource to talk through any kind of outside discussions. And then consistent with operating principles, we ask task force members just to refrain from communications that are disruptive to the meetings or the progress of the group. We'll establish the schedule. We'll aim to meet 1 day a month on average. Additional meetings may be called as necessary, and we're operating under the open meetings law. And DNR, Nate and Karen will facilitate the work and meetings. We'll record these meetings and publicly post the meetings to the website. And then any records generated may be subject to the Colorado Open Records Act. I know probably all of us are familiar with open meetings law, so this just might be a refresher. And for state public bodies, when 2 or more task force members are discussing public business, the open meetings law applies. And that's sort of a demonstrated link between the meeting and the policymaking powers of the public body. So we're publicly noticing these meetings. They're open to the public to listen in on, and they will be recorded and posted. And this includes emails, text messages, phone calls, chats between 2 or more task force members. And so a good rule of thumb on emails, don't reply all. Task force members do not include water center staff or Nate Pearson, the project manager and chair. So questions on the open meetings law, contact Nate, and then we can go from there and help. Next slide is just a reminder about Colorado Open Records Act, what those public records are. So kind of any writings or records made for this task force that includes the task force business, either paper or electronic, that could include text messages. Usually it would be DNR that would actually receive the CORA request, and we would let you know or process that. But if you do receive a request for public records, just talk to Nate and let him know. We can handle it. For accessibility, for any members of the public or any member of the task force who wish to request accommodations on our virtual meetings, we have an email address that is accessdnr@state.co.us. We have many folks that monitor that inbox, and we can get accommodations discussed with you or members of the public as soon as the same day. For media and legislative, we have an anti-harassment policy. It just talks about connecting with our DNR Human Resources Director, Richard Fields. You can also talk to Nate about any complaint or anything related to this policy. For media and legislative contacts, you may get contacted by the media or members of the legislature or their staff. And individual task force members are free to express their personal opinions and use personal resources to express beliefs. But if you do so, please clearly state that you're speaking in a personal capacity and not on behalf of the entire task force. And we have Nate and Chris Arend, our DNR Communications Director, ready to help if you do have any media requests or if you have questions about legislative issues or legislative affairs. And I just want to say thank you for all the work that you are about to do. And I think the next slide is my contact information and I can take questions. And that concludes my presentation. Thanks, Nate.
Thank you so much. Any questions for Wendy on all of this content?
I'll throw a question out. Looking at future efforts to replace funding, and replacing severance tax, potentially with something new is a unique situation here in Colorado, because if you propose a new tax, it's got to go to voters. There's a pretty lengthy process that we would trigger, right? Like, or not trigger, but start. Some of those benefit from discretion. So if we're gonna go place a new tax on Broncos stadiums, for instance, which is, to replace severance tax, that we would discuss that in an open forum. But there's a certain handicapping of that tax already if we're alerting the potential owners of a Broncos stadium. Not that this is the actual case, but how do we best handle that? Are there ways to be sensitive about potential vehicles without alerting the folks who might be paying it, or is this just the nature of this task force where everything's out in the open and we're calling our shots?
I can try to answer that, Nate, and then you can please jump in. So I think that's a great question, and I think that is where if you all get to the point of talking about potential legislation, I think you would definitely need to do that in a publicly noticed meeting. The degree to which you want to talk about detail is probably up to the task force members. If there is potential legislation and DNR would like to kind of coordinate that, then Nate would definitely be the point of contact for that. And but I think what you're talking about is, to what degree do you talk about the actual details there? You may even have things in the report that are talked about as well. I don't know if we can predict every scenario, but I do think if you want to talk to Nate, if specific scenarios come up, and then as the chair, he can kind of make sure that the level of discussion is in the right place. We do have a Director of Legislative Affairs, Daphne Gervais, and then our Executive Director, Dan Gibbs. We're all kind of heavily involved in legislative strategy during the session. And so Nate's that key to kind of coordinate those discussions. But again, the basic rule of thumb is you all are welcome to kind of have those discussions outside of the publicly noticed meetings, just saying you're not acting in your official capacity as a task force member, it's in your personal capacity. So I may not have answered the question at all. Nate, do you want to jump in?
No, I think you did, Wendy, and I would just maybe add from my perspective that, in the example that you cited, Brian, of, a new tax or fee on Broncos stadiums, I think to the extent that this group is going to recommend that we'd be discussing it in open meetings, that we'd welcome representatives of that new Broncos stadium to come discuss it with us here in front of the task force, and that we wouldn't be holding back details and discussions if it is going to be a member or a recommendation of the task force or something that we seriously consider as a group. To the extent that each of you in your personal capacities is pursuing other ideas or I don't think your participation in this group precludes you from doing that, but I think anything considered through this group we view as open to the public and subject to open meetings laws. And we'll be approaching it as such. Any other thoughts or questions on Wendy's presentation? Great. Well, thank you, Wendy, so much for taking the time to walk through that. I think really helpful to get some of the structural things out there and clear right from the start, and we can really dive into the policy at our next meeting. So thank you so much.
Thanks all.
All right. Well, we've got one more agenda item before moving to public comment, and that is meeting cadence. And so you saw in Wendy's presentation that just given the work that we have to do and the amount of time we have to do it, it is the DNR's opinion that meeting on average once a month would be reasonable and necessary for the group, the task force, to conduct the work that it is charged with. I would love to get folks' reactions to that cadence. And if folks have particular days of the week that are easier for them, or existing planned time off that would preclude you from joining a certain month, please speak up. But let's use this time to discuss meeting cadence, and then I can take the direction of the task force and move forward accordingly. So Lauren, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. Once a month seems reasonable. I would just ask that we avoid CWCB board meeting times.
Thank you for flagging that, Lauren. That's a great factor to consider. And if other folks have similar meetings or board convenings that happen on a regular basis and are scheduled far in advance, please flag those. Thank you. Elise?
I have a very full Thursday of meetings, so Thursdays tend to be pretty difficult, although I can move things around if that ends up being the best day.
Thanks. That's helpful to know, Elise.
And Nate, we have our county commissioner meetings on Tuesday, but usually they just last in the morning, so I can do afternoons.
Great. Thank you. Other thoughts or constraints? I think individual members being unavailable for a meeting here or there is to be expected. I think, I trust that everyone will make the effort to be involved as much as they can be. There will be times, just as there was today, where most of the group can make it, but some can't, and that's fine. But I think we want to go forward with a schedule that works for as many people as much of the time as possible. So. Thanks, Karen. We will take that into effect, or take that into consideration, and appreciate you moving things around so that you could join us here today. Based on the constraints that have already been communicated here verbally, it sounds like Mondays or Fridays might be our best bet. but we can work to schedule those going forward. Any other thoughts or questions? I will say that here we are on October 1st. It would be my hope to schedule our next meeting the first week of November. Are folks comfortable working to identify a time right now? Or would folks prefer to use an online poll to gauge availability? I'm happy to do either. And as I'm thinking about it, I will plan to send a poll around to the task force members to make sure we have availability, because I'm realizing that we are missing 2 of our task force members right now. And for those of you listening in from the public, we will notice and post meeting information for that meeting well in advance once it's scheduled. Great.
And Nate, I actually suggest to go for it the next couple of months. Because it's more likely that we can hold something on our calendars the farther out in advance that we know.
I agree, Robert. I would love to send you all a poll to schedule, say, 3 months in advance. Or would folks like to schedule all the way out until July of next year? Is that feasible for anybody? I'm seeing Robert nod. Great. Well, we can start with that, and if the out months get really tricky, we can reevaluate. But I will plan to send around a poll that schedules as far out as in advance as possible. I'm sure that would work for the public too, to have really advanced notice of when meetings are coming.
Nate, is the January deadline, you sort of touched on this, but the January deadline, we're not bringing an 80% baked cake here. We're just sort of bringing some ingredients. Is that the analogy here?
That's right. And I would maybe even amend your analogy to say that the water center will be bringing ingredients to you all. So there's nothing due to the Water Resources and Agriculture Review Committee. The January deadline is for the Water Center to deliver a draft report to the task force for consideration. Based on the timing, I'm anticipating that draft won't necessarily include all of the policy ideas or recommendations that the task force may consider, but will be a major starting point for that continued work, including literature review, research on current structure, and then the continued policy discussions will take place throughout the spring, winter, spring, and early summer. And then that July deadline is the report being delivered to the Water Resources and Agriculture Review Committee. Yeah, thanks for that question. Do folks have thoughts on how we are approaching those 2 deadlines, given how they differ and the timelines we're working on? Great. Karen, please.
Yeah, I wonder, given the July 15th deadline, we should certainly plan for our June meeting, or perhaps even our May meeting, for the water center to present a draft to the task force to then continue that feed. So having multiple deadlines as we work towards that July 15th date.
Sorry, I missed the mute button. That sounds like a great idea, Karen. And I would love to maybe come back to that idea at the next task force meeting, and the group can think about between now and then what sort of interim deadlines we might want to set, so that we can ensure we're advancing the work appropriately towards that July 15th deadline. Yeah, I like that idea, Karen. Thank you. Other thoughts on timeline and cadence of meetings? Great. Well, the next and last thing on our agenda is public comment. We have it scheduled to start at 12:30. If any of the task force members have any final thoughts or considerations before we move to public comment, please feel free to use this time. Robert.
Nina, this actually is reference to public comment. So if somebody submits something to your forum online, will all of us be able to review that? Because I mean, there may be some great ideas out there that we'd love to discuss.
In short, yes. And we'll work on ensuring the flow of that information. Any other final thoughts or questions? I'll just say one more time how thankful I am to everyone in this group for being willing to take the time to dig into this issue. It's something I care a great deal about personally. It's something the department and the state cares about a great deal. And I'm just really looking forward to working with this group and coming up with a really strong product to deliver to the Water Resources and Agriculture Review Committee. So just thank you again. With that, I know we do have a few members of the public online here. I would open the public comment period now. If you are an attendee and would like to speak, please raise your hand and I can unmute you and you can come on and offer up to 3 minutes of public comment. And I'll wait for just a minute to see if anybody raises their hand. So far, no one who has joined from the public has raised their hand to offer public comment. I'll maybe give another 30 seconds or so. We want to make sure people have ample opportunity to comment. And I'll just state again that there's a public comment form linked on the website that folks can offer comment on anytime they'd like. Well, seeing that no one from the public has asked to speak, I will close the public comment period. And once again, ask if folks have any final thoughts or questions or statements they'd like to make. And absent that, I'll just say thank you again. And I look forward to working with all of you. And we will be in touch soon with a lot of resources. There will be a lot of resources posted to the website in the next couple of weeks. And we will also be in touch to schedule our meetings over the next 9 months. Thank you again for joining today. And again, really looking forward to this process.
Thank you, Nate.
Thanks, Nate.
Thanks,
Bye.
Nate.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.